Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we sift through, well, frankly, piles of source material, articles, data, research on big topics like wealth and power.
And we try to pull out the core stuff you really need to grasp.
Exactly. Today, we're diving into the anatomy of modern mega-wealth, and we're using one particular figure as our main case study, Bill Gates.
That's right. Our listeners sent over materials that really anchor us to two key aspects of the Gates story. First, his, let's call it, aggressive early business strategy.
Okay.
And second, the sheer scale and structure of the financial engine that keeps his huge fortune growing today.
So our mission here isn't just biography. We're trying to examine power itself.
Precisely. How does someone transition from, dominating a market to wielding this massive global influence? What were the tactics in each phase?
And the sources we have, they confirm some key facts to build on. Details about early Microsoft, yes, but also, crucially, hard data on how fast that kind of wealth grows.
Right. So we want to unpack the calculated efficiency needed to build that initial fortune.
And then analyze the financial structure that makes it grow almost automatically.
Exactly. And understand how that growth translates, almost inevitably, into influence.
Okay, so let's start with the scale, because that really sets the stage.
It does. This is the hook, really. We're talking about a class of wealth where the numbers are just hard to fathom.
Yeah.
The data shows fortunes like Gates's, the absolute top tier globally.
Yeah.
They've grown at real rates. That's after inflation of 6 to 7% a year, sometimes even higher. And that's been happening for the last 3 decades.
6 or 7% real growth. That's huge, year after year.
It is. And that kind of exponential speed fundamentally changes what capital is. It's not like earning a salary anymore.
Right. It operates under different rules. We need to keep that number, that 6-7%, in our minds as we look at the first part of the story. Okay, let's unpack this first phase then. Before the Bill Gates of global health and philanthropy, there was the Gates who built Microsoft into a behemoth, market conquest. How did he actually achieve that initial dominant position? What strategies do the sources highlight?
Well, the sources point strongly towards a strategy of accelerated development, basically buying time and skipping steps to get ahead fast.
Okay, how so?
Think about the early 80s. Graphical interfaces, GUIs, were clearly the future. Microsoft knew they had to pivot, and quickly.
Or risk becoming obsolete.
Exactly. Now, the normal way would be years of internal R&D. Slow, expensive, risky.
Gives competitors a chance to catch up or leapfrog you. So what did Gates do instead?
He went straight to the source. Xerox, PRAAC, the legendary lab that basically invented the modern desktop look and feel.
Ah, right. They had the core ideas.
They did. And specifically in the summer of '83, Gates didn't just hire engineers. He went after key, high-level people who already had deep expertise in GUI. People like Charles Simonyi, Scott McGregor.
So he wasn't just hiring employees, he was acquiring intellectual capital instantly.
That's a good way to put it. Resource absorption. Hire the people who've already built it, and you potentially save years of development.
Cut out the trial and error.
Right. McGregor apparently said Microsoft was shopping at Xerox because, and this is the key phrase, they didn't want to reinvent the wheel.
That really sums up the mindset, doesn't it? Identify the critical piece you need for dominance GUI skills and just acquire it directly.
Accelerate your position, reduce the risk, widen the gap with competitors. The cost to those salaries was negligible compared to the strategic advantage of speed.
Okay, so here's the question, though. If Microsoft paid fair market value for these top developers, is that just smart business, or does it edge into those monopolist tactics we often hear about? Where's the line?
That's always the million-dollar question with these titans, isn't it? Smart business says hire the best.
Sure.
But when that hiring is specifically designed to grab the one resource, that GUI expertise, that your competitors are still struggling to develop internally.
You create a technological barrier they might never overcome.
Exactly. It helps lock in an advantage that makes future competition incredibly difficult. It's about controlling the essential infrastructure of the next market phase. Calculated aggression.
And this approach, this relentless drive to optimize and absorb resources, it's not just a tech thing, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. This pattern is classic. It goes right back to the original robber barons, the industrial titans.
Right. Let's make that connection. Gates acquiring talent. How does that compare to someone like Andrew Carnegie?
Carnegie was the absolute master of cost control. If Gates accelerated development time, Carnegie obsessed over squeezing every penny out of steel production.
His goal wasn't just better steel, it was cheaper steel.
Cheaper than anyone else could possibly manage. That way he could just undercut everyone on price and drive them out of business. Ruthless efficiency.
And he saw this efficiency almost as a moral duty, pushing his own teams incredibly hard.
The sources give us a glimpse into that internal pressure. There's this revealing note from December 1884 from one of his managers, Captain Jones, to Carnegie.
Yeah.
Jones basically confirms their shared plan to hammer down labor costs for the next year, saying they certainly must cut close in our rates.
Yeah.
And all we have to do is keep a stiff upper lip.
Keep a stiff upper lip. Wow. That phrase tells you everything about the pressure on the workers to just accept whatever cuts were needed for Carnegie's cost dominance.
It does. But here's where Carnegie was also incredibly shrewd as public relations. He could be brutal internally.
But play the man of the people externally.
When it suited him, yes. The sources show him attacking the powerful Pennsylvania Railroad, for example.
Buy them.
He accused them of charging extortionate rates that, he claimed, hurt general business and threatened future prosperity.
So while building his own near monopoly in steel, he's attacking their monopoly in transport.
Precisely. He positioned himself as speaking for the great army of labor, whose jobs were supposedly threatened by the railroad giants. Brilliant, really. Attack your competitors by tapping into popular anger about corporate power.
Deflect attention from your own consolidation by pointing fingers elsewhere. That seems quite different from someone like Cornelius Vanderbilt. He seems less subtle.
Vanderbilt was pure competitive force. The sources literally say he wielded every possible weapon in business fights.
No holding back.
None. Take his fight with accessory transit. He launched a competing steamship line not just for profit, but apparently driven by a personal vendetta against some rivals involved.
So he weaponized his anger, used it as a market strategy.
Absolutely. The result was market chaos. Drastically lower prices between California and New York for a while.
Which just sounds good for customers initially.
But it simultaneously destroyed accessory transit's profits, crashed their stock price, enriched Vanderbilt, punished his enemies, and incidentally wiped out ordinary investors who held their stock. He used competition itself as a destructive weapon to gain control.
It's hard to imagine that kind of tactic today without massive legal challenges.
Yeah.
But what's striking is, didn't his rivals still respect him, according to the sources?
Some did, yes. Figures like Cornelius Garrison and Charles Morgan, they apparently socialized with him after their battles. It's bizarre to us, maybe.
Yeah, what does it say about that world?
It suggests respect wasn't about being nice. It was about sheer capability, about willpower, and maybe a kind of warped honor among combatants. They knew Vanderbilt would stop at nothing.
So whether it's Gates grabbing key tech talent, Carnegie demanding that stiff upper lip for cost cuts, or Vanderbilt using personal fury to sink a competitor.
The first act is always about maximum efficiency, eliminating obstacles, and securing that dominant position. That's what builds the initial massive wealth.
And that wealth then takes on a life of its own, which brings us to the second phase.
Exactly. The focus shifts from personal effort to the power of the capital itself.
Okay, this is where things get, well, arguably even more significant for society today. Moving past the individual drive, the ambition.
And into the mechanics of how this extreme wealth actually works.
Right. Once that market dominance is locked in, the wealth changes character. It's not about Gates' salary as CEO anymore. It's about compounding capital.
This is the engine room for global influence. And it runs on that fundamental principle we talked about earlier, the War-G dynamic.
Remind us what that means again?
The rate of return on capital is consistently higher than the overall rate of economic growth.
So invested wealth grows faster than the economy as a whole?
Structurally faster. This isn't just about being a lucky or smart investor, though that helps. It's a built-in advantage of large-scale capital.
And that key data point you mentioned.
That the very wealthiest, including Gates, have seen their fortunes grow after inflation at 6 to 7% a year, maybe more, for decades now.
To really get why that's so powerful, we need to understand what this wealth is actually made of, right? It's not like owning a big house.
Not primarily, no. For this super elite group, wealth is overwhelmingly financial assets. Stocks, shares in private companies, hedge fund stakes, partnership interests.
Things that can grow fast, potentially.
Exactly. Assets that are volatile but offer high returns and, importantly, benefit from the scale of the investment. You get access to deals and strategies unavailable to ordinary savers.
And physical assets like real estate.
According to the source material, real estate is less than 10% of fortunes above 10 million euros. The money isn't tied up, it's dynamic, it's working constantly.
Let's just illustrate that 6-7% growth again. If the wider economy, G, is growing at maybe 2%.
And your capital is growing at 7%.
Yeah.
The gap between your wealth and the average just widens exponentially over time.
It becomes a runaway train.
It creates a self-fueling cycle. If you start with, say, $50 billion, a Gates-level fortune, a 7% return is $3.5 billion in 1 year.
Just from the money working itself. No new product launched, no company managed day-to-day.
Right, and that $3.5 billion gain might be bigger than the entire GDP of a small country. Plus, the bigger your fortune, the better the returns you can often command because you get into exclusive investment opportunities.
The rich get richer, literally by design of the financial system.
The wealth compounds, generating more capital to reinvest, locking in that exponential curve.
Which leads us straight into this huge problem, this paradox around taxation.
Yes, the tax paradox.
If someone like Gates is gaining billions in actual economic value each year from that 7% growth, why is their declared income often so relatively small?
This is the absolute core of the debate. You have to distinguish economic income from declared income for tax purposes.
Okay, explain that difference.
Economic income is the real increase in your resources, your capacity to spend or invest. For Gates, that includes dividends, interest, and the appreciation in the value of his assets, his stocks. That's easily 6-7% of his fortune annually. Billions.
And this is the crucial part. Most of that gain is just the value of his shares going up, right? Unrealized capital gains.
Exactly. And under most tax systems, you only pay tax on capital gains when you sell the asset, when you realize the gain.
So if you don't sell,
you don't pay tax on that growth. And the ultra-wealthy are masters of avoiding selling. They can borrow vast sums against their appreciated shares at very low interest rates.
So they get cash to live on or invest more without triggering the tax.
Precisely. Compare that to someone earning a salary. That income is taxed immediately, fully. It's a fundamentally different treatment.
What kind of gap does this create? If the economic gain is billions, what's the typical declared income relative to that?
The sources are stark. They suggest for the super rich, declared income can be less than 1/100th of their true economic income.
Less than 1%.
Yes. They use the example of Liliane Bettencourt, the late L'Oreal heiress. Fortune estimated over 30 billion euros, implying economic income in the billions. Her declared income, never more than 5 million euros a year.
Wow. Just let that sink in. Less than 100th.
It shows our tax systems are fundamentally designed for a different era, for wages, for business operating profits. They are not equipped to handle or even measure accurately this kind of exponential growth in asset values.
Which raises that huge question the sources pose. How can society fairly gauge the contributive capacity of the wealthy if the main way wealth grows for them is barely visible to the tax system?
The system is miscalibrated for 21st century mega wealth.
And this structure, this allows wealth to concentrate and potentially become permanent generation after generation. It starts to challenge the whole justification for inequality, doesn't it? The idea that wealth is earned through risk and innovation.
It really does. The entrepreneurial argument is important, no doubt. Society benefits from invention, from risk-taking like Gates's early days.
Sure.
But the sources argue that justification has limits. It cannot reasonably explain or justify all levels of inequality, especially when fortunes reach astronomical sizes and then perpetuate themselves automatically.
So once the wealth hits that 7% annual growth trajectory, largely independent of the owner's ongoing effort, it sort of detaches from the original social utility argument.
That's the argument. When capital returns consistently outpace economic growth, fortunes can grow beyond all reasonable limits and exceed any possible rational justification in terms of social utility.
It just becomes a feature of the financial system itself.
A feature that guarantees ongoing massive concentration of capital. And that concentration provides the financial firepower for the third act, turning wealth into influence and power.
Okay, so we've seen the aggressive tactics to build the fortune in part 1 and the almost automatic exponential growth engine in part 2.
Right, the sheer scale of the capital.
Now part 3. How does that mountain of capital translate into real-world power and influence? This is the second phase in action, moving beyond business into shaping the world.
It's about converting financial capital into other forms of power, often non-political, what people sometimes call soft power, but it's very real.
When you control billions, you automatically get a platform, a voice, an ability to push agendas or frame debates.
And often, crucially, without the checks and balances of, say, an electoral system. There's no direct accountability to the public.
The sources give parallels here, right? It's not just tech billionaires. Look at someone like Oprah Winfrey in the media world.
Oprah's a fascinating example of choosing influence over formal politics. She explicitly said her daily TV show, going into people's homes, gave her a bigger platform than politics.
And she used it.
Oh, absolutely. She acted almost as a kind of national conscience, issuing judgments on public figures. The sources mention her chastising Toni Braxton over bankruptcy, Lionel Richie about fatherhood.
That affects reputations, careers. It's real power, wielded from a media platform built on commercial success.
Exactly. The wealth, whether from tech like Gates or media like Oprah or old industry like Carnegie, provides the foundation. And that power is then used to shape reality or enforce norms, often without any formal oversight.
Which brings us to the accountability problem. When that wealth is aimed directly at political or ideological goals, things get even murkier. The Koch brothers are a key example in the sources.
Yes, a very clear example of weaponizing financial clout for specific political ends. The sources describe their network as possibly the single most effective special interest group in the U.S. at the time.
And the sheer amount of money involved.
It's staggering. One year, $115 million flowed through just one entity, the Center to Protect Patient Rights, aimed squarely at shaping political debates and regulations.
But it wasn't just the amount, it was how it was sometimes structured, right?
That's a critical detail. Often, this kind of funding was channeled through structures where it could be treated, at least partially, as a tax-deductible business expense.
Wait, so influencing politics could be subsidized by the taxpayer?
In effect, yes, using tax breaks designed for business operations to fund ideological campaigns. It raises profound ethical questions about private, unelected individuals using concentrated wealth to shape public policy, operating outside democratic accountability.
We also see this pattern with figures like George Soros, using immense wealth generated in finance to fund philanthropic and political causes, sometimes directly challenging governments.
Soros provides a really dramatic illustration of this leverage. The sources mention his foundation's work in Hungary.
His home country originally.
Right. The government there apparently objected to publicizing the details of grants his foundation was making. Soros's reaction was immediate and forceful.
What did he do?
The sources say he reacted in cold fury, planning to go on the radio and deliver an ultimatum. Either the government backed down on transparency, or he would pull all his foundation's projects out of Hungary.
Wow. That's a private individual, a non-state actor, essentially threatening to economically punish a sovereign elected government if it didn't comply with his demands on transparency.
It's an extraordinary display of leverage. The power, derived from his accumulated capital, allowed him to issue a threat that functioned like a potential veto over national policy.
That really embodies the second phase perfectly, doesn't it? The wealth, built through whatever means in the first act, amplified by that exponential growth.
Grants an authority, a power to act, that operates completely outside the normal democratic process, whether it's funding political machines, shaping media narratives, or wielding philanthropy as leverage.
The influence is immense, often unilateral, and raises constant questions because there's no direct line back to the voters, to the public. #outro. So let's bring this together. We started this deep dive looking at Bill Gates, the architect, aggressively acquiring talent from Xerox PR, building that initial tech dominance.
A pattern we saw mirrored in different ways by historical figures like Carnegie with his relentless cost-cutting and Vanderbilt with his pure competitive force. That first act of building the empire.
Then we shifted to the second phase, Gates, the financial powerhouse, where the story becomes less about personal action and more about the structure of his wealth itself.
That staggering capital growing exponentially at 6–7% real return per year, driven by the dragée dynamic. Wealth that grows faster than the economy and largely escapes traditional taxation.
Creating that huge gap between real economic clout and what's declared on paper.
Right. And the constant thread connecting these two phases, these two acts. It's the sheer power that comes with that scale of capital.
The efficiency, sometimes ruthless efficiency, of Act 1 builds the foundation.
And the financial velocity of Act 2 transforms that foundation into unprecedented global influence, which forces us back to that difficult question.
Can you or should you separate the two? Can the good done in the second act, the philanthropy, the global initiatives, which we know are vast, even if not detailed in these specific sources, erase the memory or the ethical questions of the first act's tactics?
It's the core dilemma. Does the end justify the means, especially when the end involves wielding a level of private power that operates almost like a nation-state, but without the accountability?
It pushes us beyond just admiring innovation or criticizing monopolies. We have to ask, is there a point where wealth accumulation itself becomes problematic simply because it translates into a degree of influence that might overwhelm democratic structures?
Which leads us perfectly into our final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If our current global systems technology, finance, allow individuals to amass capital that grows structurally faster, year after year, at 6 or 7%, outpacing most national economies.
How long can democratic institutions actually keep up? How long until the sheer influence of these mega fortunes fundamentally overshadows the ability of elected governments to regulate effectively and ensure genuine public accountability?
Something to really think about in the world we're living in.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.